Hey guys, I'm here with a tutorial video to show you how to do this assembly here in Lab 5. This assembly has lots of different parts to it that show you most of the types of constraints that you'll probably ever have to use here in this software. Okay, so here's the final end goal. This can slide back and forth. This can rotate. It's put in place. There you go. Okay, let's get started. So on Moodle, if you download this file from Moodle called various things, you'll see that it's a zipped folder. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is unzip it so that we can work with it. So after you've downloaded this from Moodle, you should right click on it and you can click on extract to, and then this will put it in a folder here. So you need to extract it. Alright, and notice then that I'll create a folder here that has all these files here. Okay, these are the files that we'll be working with. Alright, so notice I've got a folder here on the desktop named Engineering Drawing Lab 5. Within that, here's this various things. There's a folder within that, and then here's all your parts. Okay, you want to now create a assembly file. So we want a new assembly. So go to File, New. Alright, and what we want is a standard millimeter assembly here. Standard millimeter assembly. Now we're on an assembly file. So standard millimeter assembly. Now this type of assembly that we're creating is called the bottom-up approach. What that means is, look, I've actually already have all my files created. So I've created all my parts, and now I just want to put them together into the assembly. That's the bottom-up. The bottom is the parts, and then going up to the assembly. Okay? Alright, so this picture here in your lab gives you the names of all the parts. The first piece you want to place is a piece that most every other part is related to. Okay, well, that would obviously be this base part here. Okay, so that's the first part I want to place. Okay, so let's go to place. And now I want to navigate to the folder where all my parts are. Mine's actually on the desktop under Lab 5, various things. Here it is. Okay, so there's the base. Let's open that. Alright, now the first thing I want to do is I want to ground this component. Okay, I'm going to right click and hit place grounded at origin. Okay, typically the first component that you put in you want to ground. Now I could put in multiple instances of this part, but I don't want to do that, so let's just click escape to get out of placing, and here's this part that's grounded. Now, I'll show you what I mean by grounded later on, but it means basically it's fixed, that hey, I can't move it, all the other parts will move relative to that. And you see this little thumbnail there on that part, that means that it's grounded. If I were to right click on that, you see this grounded, I could uncheck it there. Well, now the thumbnail is gone. Well, you always need one part that's grounded. Alright, let's go save our assembly now. Okay, do File, Save As, and we want to make sure to put our assembly in the same place where all the parts are. And this is the folder that all my parts are in. Okay, so I'll just call it assembly. Let's call it demo 1. Okay. Alright, I've saved my assembly. Now I want to start put in some other parts here. Okay, let's go put in this part called the bushing right here. Let's put that in. Okay, so let's go to place. I'll go find my bushing. I'll click one time and then click escape. Okay, so here I want to now constrain my bushing to where it fits inside this hole here. Okay, so these are the relationships that we'll use here. The main one that we'll be using is constrain. Let's click on constrain. And one constraint I want to do is I want to make this axis, make sure you don't select a point. That's a point. I want an axis. The axis of that hole should be the same as the axis of this here. Okay. Now click OK. And now look at this. Now I can move it, but it's always constrained to be, those axes now are always collinear to each other. Okay. Well, the next constraint that I want to do is I want to bring this down into where it's flat, sitting right on top of the surface there. Okay. So you can always think about how would you put this together in reality. Alright, so now let's go to constrain, and I want this surface to fit with this surface here. Okay, and there it is. Now click OK. Now think, how many degrees of freedom does this have? Well, I can still rotate it right there. I can see how many degrees of freedom it has by clicking on View here in the View tab, then click on Degrees of Freedom, and look, it's kind of hard to see, but you see that little arrow there that's a rotation, right? Well, that's showing that this can only rotate like this. Okay. Now look, these constraints that I've made, they're underneath this little drop-down arrows. So there's the constraint I made on the axes. There's the one on the face. If you made a mistake on one, I could delete it. Let's say I want to delete that. Well, now look at the degrees of freedom. There's a green arrow that shows rotation. Then there's another arrow pointing down here that shows that it's free to move up and down like this. So that's 2 degrees of freedom. One like this and one rotating. Okay. Let's go ahead and create that constraint again here and here. Alright. I'm going to turn my degrees of freedom off. Okay. Now that I've got that one in place, let's go put in, let's say, let's put in this handle right here. Okay. So now I'm going to go to place, and let's go find the handle. Here's the handle. I'll just click one time, click escape, and now bring it close to over here. Alright, let's look at the orientation here. This handle's pointing out this way. Okay, right now my handle's not close to pointing out, it's pointing the wrong direction. Here's a hint, guys. Before you constrain the part, it's good to get the part in the approximate position that it will be in, but before you constrain it. Alright, so I want to rotate this thing around, so let's click on free rotate. Now I click on the part, and then I can just rotate it around. Alright, that's about where I want it to be right there. Okay, now click escape. So I want to put this here. Okay, now let's do a constraint. Well, notice here it's this hexagon head here. Alright, so here's how I'll do the constraints. There's a couple ways to do this, not exactly one right way, but here's the way I'll do it. Let's get this face, and let's say, well, that needs to fit up against this face. Okay. Now click OK. Well, now look at this. Okay, this face, these faces are always in line. I can't move it to the left or to the right. I can move it up. Okay. Now, what else do I want to do? You see it's kind of at an angle. Well, I want also this bottom face to meet down on this face here. Okay. You say, hey, well, that's all nice, but the hole's not there anymore. What's wrong? Look, I still have 1 degree of freedom. I can move it like this. Let's go constrain another one of the faces. So right now this face is constrained to this one, let's just pick another one of those faces there, one that's not parallel to it. So let's constrain this one with this one. Alright, now click OK, and now it's completely fixed. If you click and hold and try to move it, it can't move. Okay, it's fully constrained there, and you can see these 3 mate constraints that I've done. Alright, easy enough there. Alright, now let's go put this slider in right here. Let's do that slide. Alright, let's go to place, let's get the slide, click OK. Alright, now a couple things with this slide here. Well, I do see that I'll want this slide to, let's say these faces here to fit flush with this top face. Okay, so let's do that. Let's do a constraint and make this fit with this. Alright, well, I can still slide it all around right here. Now let's go make this constraint the same as that side right there. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. So now this thing can move, but here's the problem. I want it to stop here and then stop when it gets to the other side. Right now I can just continue to move it through everything, and that's not good. That's not what I want. Alright, so now let's see how to add in what's called these limits. Okay, so that I limit the motion from here to here. Well, here's what I'm going to do. Okay, first let's constrain, let's say, this face to fit flush up against here. Okay, now watch this. Right now it's fixed on this end. Now there's this thing called limits here. Maybe yours is hiding. If you click these 2 double arrows here, you'll see these limits pop up. Okay, you can click on a minimum and a maximum here. So if I can set different distances. Okay, so watch this. Let's set this distance here to, I don't know, to be 20. We'll see what happens. Well, I can move this now a distance of 20, and then it stops. Okay, well, I need it to go further than that. Let's right click on this mate here, and now notice right here you see this plus or minus. This plus or minus says that there's a limit there. Okay, and these don't have a plus or minus because there's no limit. Those faces are touching each other here. Here I had that limit. I can right click and click edit, and now I'm back here. Okay, let me uncheck these, and here's what's going to happen now. So now it's flush against this edge. I want to figure out how far can it move. Well, I want to be able to move it from here all the way to here. But how far is that? Well, I can go measure that. If I go to tools here, under the tools there's a distance, a little ruler. Just click on that. I'm going to click on this face and this face, and the ruler tells me that's a distance of 170 millimeters. Okay, so that's how far I need to set the limitation here. So let's right click here and click edit. Under the limits, now the maximum now I know to put 170. Now click OK. So look at this. It can move up to 170, and it's all the way flush at this end, and then it stops over on that end. Great. Easy enough. That's adding limits. Okay. Now let's go add in the slender rod that sits here in this wedge. Okay, we're going to add in this part here. All right. So again, let's go to place. I'll go find the slender rod. Okay, click escape. Alright. Okay, let's go add this in. Now, Let's go to constrain again. Now I want to use a different type of constraint this time. It won't just, every time I've just been using this make constraint. Now I want to use a tangent constraint because this is going to sit right in here, and it's a flat surface against a curved surface. Okay, so that will be, whoops, sorry. Let's click on constraint again. That will be this tangent constraint. So let's click on this curved surface and say mate it with that surface. Click OK. Now these surfaces are always tangent. Okay, you see those, if this is always tangent. Okay, but I also want to make it tangent with this other face over here. So let's go to constrain. Let's make that surface tangent with this one. Now click OK, and you can see what it's done there. Whoop. Whoop, I've actually made, I think I clicked on the center point, not on the surface, because you see clearly it's not tangent. Something's wrong there. What did I do with this last one? I used the make constraint, not the tangent. I forgot to click on tangent. So let's just delete this. Okay, so we have one tangent constraint. Alright, now let's go back to constrain. Make sure we click on tangent. I did it, sorry, that's the tangent there. Click on tangent. Now let's select that surface and this surface. Click OK. And now you can see if I go here, you see these two surfaces are tangent. Alright. There you go. So that's how you use the tangent constraint there. Okay, now let's go add in this flap right here, and we'll deal with an angle constraint. Okay, so again, let's go to place. It's called the flap. Click OK. Now watch this. If you, let's say, had more than one flap, I could click once, twice, 3 times, click escape, and you have several of these to put in. Okay, well, we only need one, so I can delete 2 of these. Let's say this one and this one we don't need. Let's delete those. Okay, here's one flap here. Alright, this flap will rotate around this axis here, or around that rod. So let's first add in that constraint that I know how to do. Let's make that axis the same as this axis. Click OK. Now here it can rotate and slide left or right. Well, on the sliding left or right, one thing I want to do is I want to make this flap always in the middle here. So I don't want it here, not over here, always exactly in the middle. Okay? How can I do that? Let me show you the easiest way to do that. Okay? And it's actually not by constraining surfaces, but by constraining planes. Okay? So on this flap here, let's look at some planes. Look at this plane here. You see this plane that's right in the middle of that flap? Well, I want to take that plane and constrain it with a plane that's right in the middle between this part here and that part. Okay? So let's go see if I can find a plane, or let's see if there is one. Let's go to this base here. Not that plane. Not that one. Not that one. There's one there. It's not that. What about that plane? Hey, look at that work plane there. It's right there in the middle. Okay. Now you say, hey, what if that work plane was created? What if that work plane wasn't there? Well, you could go make a plane in the middle between these two. But luckily we have one. So now let's go to constrain. And let's constrain this plane, which you see is right in the middle. Okay. And let's constrain it with this plane here on the flap. Now click OK. And now it can only rotate. Okay, I can't slide it left or right. And it's perfectly constrained in the middle. Okay. Alright. Now I want to limit the rotation of this to where stops here and then stops here. Okay, so let's show that rotation constraint. Here's an angle. That's what I want. There's different types of angles here that I can do. This is the most common one that I want. Okay, this third one here. So you see the first two arrows are going to be, let's say, arrows on surfaces that I want to define the angle between. Let's click on this surface, and let's say define the angle between that surface and let's say this one here. Okay, so I want to define this angle here between there, but now the third surface that I need to choose is one that the arrow of that surface, so you see the arrow of this surface is perpendicular to this one. I need a third arrow that's perpendicular to both this one and this one. Now this one is in the same direction, it's not that. What about this surface here? Or this surface? It doesn't matter. You see this surface? That arrow is perpendicular to these other two. Okay? And now I can play around with the angle. That third arrow there is called your reference vector. Okay? Now let's go play around with this angle. Let's make this 90 degrees. Oh, you can see this angle 90. What if it's 0 zeros like that? I don't want that. I want to play around with this angle. There's 90. That's one limit there. Let's say if I keep going up to 100. No, that's 100. 150. Okay, I'm getting to my other spot. Let's look at 180. Okay, that should be one limit, and then the other limit is 90. So I can use, so I'm just playing around with these numbers here to try to find what are the limits of this angle that I've created. Okay, so now let's click on the maximum and minimum. Let's make the minimum 90 as I found, and the maximum 180. So those were numbers that I found just by playing around and playing around with this angle and seeing how that how that rested this flap here. Now click OK. Look here. Now it's limited. This is the 90 degree position, and that's the 180 degree position. And it's free to move in between that. Alright, we're doing good so far. Now the next thing I want to do is I need to go put in this other slide here. Now notice on this vertical rod and this slider, those two are constrained together. They're two separate parts. So you could think of that as an actual little sub-assembly within this bigger assembly. So here's what I'll do with that is I'll actually go create another assembly and then load in that assembly rather than loading in parts. Okay, this is very helpful to do when you're working on large assemblies and you have lots of sub-assemblies within there. Okay, so I'm going to actually go make a new assembly, which will be actually a little sub-assembly. Okay, so let's go new assembly. Alright, now I want to save this as, now in the same place where I have this assembly, let's just call this subassembly 1. Okay, save that. Alright, now what's going to go in this subassembly? Well, it's basically this vertical rod and that cylinder slider there. Okay, so the first thing, let's go put the vertical rod in. Oops, sorry, I've got out of my folder here. Alright, let's go find, there's the vertical rod. Now this is my first piece, so remember, let's ground this. Okay. And now let's go place my slider. Okay, or that cylinder slider. What was it called there? Cylinder slider. Click OK. Alright, now I want this to be constrained on to slide up and down on the cylinder, so let's make this axis the same as that one. Click OK, and Now let's do the same thing that I did for that other constraint, okay, to where I want to make limits on this, right? Remember that right now this can slide past here, and I don't want that. I want to limit it, to stop there and there. So let's just go do the same thing I did last time. First, let's make a mate constraint here, okay. Guys, one thing I want to show you is, notice this solution here. I haven't talked about this. Let me talk about that briefly. Watch this. If I first click on this surface, you see that arrow that's pointing perpendicular to that surface? And now if I put my cursor here, there's another arrow that's pointing perpendicular to it. So if I click on that, right now those arrows are pointing in opposite direction, okay? Opposite direction. That's what this picture shows. This picture shows they're pointing in the same direction. So if I do that, notice how these two arrows now that I've selected for the face are pointing in the same direction. So all that does is switch it back and forth. Okay? Alright. Well, now it can't slide, but now I need to go measure the distance that I want to be able to have it slide. So let's measure the distance from that surface to that surface, and it's a distance of 100 millimeters. So let's go back to this mate constraint that I just made. Let's edit that, and let's put in some limits here. Let's make the maximum 100. Click OK. There you go, and now it can slide within the proper limitations. Okay, so let's save this. Let's save it as just Subassembly 2, let's say. Yes to all right here. You always want to do this. This says I want to save any changes to parts that I've made. Alright, so saving this assembly would also save any changes to parts that I've made. Click on yes to all and click on OK and OK. Alright, so now I've got a subassembly that I've just created. So back over here I can go to place, and I can actually, where's that subassembly there? Well, evidently I don't see my subassembly. That means I must have saved it in the wrong place. Let's just go save it again and make sure I have it in this correct folder here. That's on my desktop, engineering drawing 5, various things, and class demonstration there. So let's go do that. Let's come back here to my subassembly. Okay, so let's make sure I save this in the right place. Let's go File, Save As, and I want to get all the way back to my desktop here. There's the file, or the folder I'm working in. Okay, there's where the demo one is. Let's call this just Subassembly's fine. Let's take out the 2. Subassembly. Click Save. Okay. Now when I go back here, I should be able to go to Place now. And let's go back to my desktop. There's that. Let's go find, there's the subassembly. Alright. Click OK. There it is. I click one time, and okay, so now I want this subassembly to go right in that hole. That's easy enough. Let's first do that axis with this axis. Now slide it up, and let's do this face with that face there. Alright, now look at this though. Now, if I try to slide this slider, it doesn't move. What's the problem there? Remember, I thought I could slide it over here, right? Oh, hey, look at this. Things are linked. Watch this. You see that's at the top? If I change it over here, slide it up to the very top, over here it's changed, but over here I can't move it. Well, I can change that it's by changing a setting here on this assembly. Notice all these are parts, and now I've put in an assembly here, so it's an assembly icon, not a part icon. Let's right click on that. All right. Okay, well, if I right click on it, I have a problem with my screen that there's actually more options down below here that I can't see. Hopefully on yours, when you right click, you'll be able to see all the options. One of those options is flexible. Okay, so I'm going to have to drag this off the screen and make it flexible, and then I'll come back. But hopefully if you right click here, you'll see flexible. Just click on that and make sure it has a check mark next to it. Okay, so I finally just made it flexible. You can see these little icons here that show that assembly is flexible, and what that means is I'm allowed to move this within this assembly. Alright, that's great, guys. So there we've pretty much finished this part here. Okay, or this whole assembly. I've shown you these different constraints. The last thing that you should do then is maybe make sure you've updated the bill of materials. Okay, so with this bill of materials, let's say if you want to remove some of these columns here, you can go to the column chooser, and I can, let's say, drag the description out here. I don't want that. Drag the stock number. I can drag the revision. I can add in different things such as the author. Okay, I can add in, let's say, the material. Okay, and even if I want to make changes in here, you can do it right here. Let's say this handle, I could go change this material right here rather than having to go open up the part. Okay, I can make it our PLA plastic that we're using in our projects. Okay, so yeah, this is very helpful to have on this bill of materials. It's kind of a one-stop place for seeing all the parts that's in your assembly. Okay. Alright guys, hope that was helpful. We're done there, so yeah, you should be ready for any quizzes that you have, or making your assemblies for your projects. See you.